Good morning. I'm Savannah Sellers.
And I'm Joe Fryer. Right now on Morning News Now, facing the future. President Joe Biden is back in Washington this morning, fresh off a, quote, positive summit with his Russian counterpart, Vladimir Putin. The Russian leader echoing Biden's sentiment, calling the summit constructive. But has any real progress been made toward fixing a frayed relationship? We'll dig deeper into these historic talks. Vaccination, please. Health officials are sounding the alarm today over the growing threat of the Delta variant of COVID-19. Experts are warning it could become the most dominant strain in the U.S. The Biden administration is making a renewed vaccination push, and experts say that people who are not vaccinated are most at risk. What does this mean as more states reopen? Sweltering heat. More than 40 million people across the West are seeing temperatures climb well into the high 90s, even crossing into triple digits as a truly historic heat wave rolls on. Now grabbing headlines, the potential for a brand new hottest temperature ever recorded on Earth. We'll tell you where that might happen and when cooler temps will hopefully start rolling in. And going for gold. Tokyo's Olympics now are just about a month away, but America's athletes are already hard at work competing in round after round of Olympic trials all this month. Jackie Joyner-Kersee, one of the greatest Olympians to ever wear the red, white, and blue, knows what it takes to make the games. Our conversation on what these athletes need to do to make it to Tokyo. Excited to have that conversation with her.
Yes, absolutely. And just hopefully looking forward to these games.
Yes, finally.
Yes,
a year later, but they're coming, we think.
I know, yeah, exactly.
Right. More on that in a little bit. But we want to start this morning with President Biden hailing his meeting with Russian President Vladimir Putin as positive and productive. The two leaders sought common ground on some issues, but stumbled on others, like Russia's record on human rights violations.
NBC News White House correspondent Jeff Bennett has more on the summit and the future of U.S.-Russia relations.
Hey, good morning, Joe and Savannah. President Joe Biden and Russian President Vladimir Putin emerged from roughly 3 hours of meetings in Switzerland yesterday, projecting optimism for future relations despite continued divisions on thorny topics from cyber attacks to human rights abuses. Now, there was never any expectation that the meeting in Geneva would solve the many problems between the U.S. and Russia, but President Biden says it was important to lay out the U.S. position and set some rules of the road in a relationship that has been eroding for years.
Overnight, President Biden returning to the White House, fresh off his face-to-face with Russian President Vladimir Putin. The Russian leader
Good morning, everybody. I'm Savannah Guthrie in New York, and we have a decision just breaking from the Supreme Court on a challenge to Obamacare, the Affordable Care Act. And I want to get right to NBC's Pete Williams, who is outside the court this morning. This was the challenge that was brought originally by states opposed to Obamacare. The Supreme Court took on the case. Oral arguments were right after the election. People will remember that. What's the decision?
For the third time, the U.S. Supreme Court has spared Obamacare from challenges, this time from a group of red states who said the individual mandate was unconstitutional and could not be upheld as a legitimate use of Congress's taxing authority because Congress had later set that tax penalty if you didn't buy insurance at zero. But today, in a 7-2 decision, the Supreme Court simply says that the states who challenged it didn't have the legal standing to bring this case. In other words, they've thrown the case out without ruling on the underlying issue. They basically say that the red states didn't demonstrate that they were injured enough by the Obamacare surviving to be able to bring this challenge into court. Now, the Supreme Court in recent years has been very picky about groups that can come into court, what's known for the lawyers as legal standing, and that's the basis of this decision. So this is not a decision on the merits. This is simply a decision saying these states didn't have the legal standing to bring this case. So what this does is it means that in the future, other states could try again this same legal challenge. And if they can find enough ways to get people together and cobble up another case, Obamacare could face yet another challenge. But for now, Obamacare survives again, a 7-2 decision from the Supreme Court rejecting this challenge without ruling on the underlying case.
Yeah, that's what's so interesting here, Pete. They absolutely sidestepped the issue that a lot of the oral argument focused on was whether the individual mandate that required people to buy insurance, whether that was unconstitutional. We recall that it was saved back in 2012 because it was framed as a tax. They didn't reach any of those issues. And I'm looking at the breakdown here of the justices 7-2. So this isn't one of those split down ideological lines. Justice Breyer delivered the opinion. Yes. Right, and and I was about to say Alito and Gorsuch were the dissenters.
And they said the court should have taken the case and they would have held the law unconstitutional, but they did not carry the day. They were only able to get 2 of the 6 conservatives to agree with them.
So it's interesting, Pete, because the challengers to Obamacare actually won in the courts below. They won in the trial court, and then that decision throwing out Obamacare was then affirmed at the Circuit Court of Appeals. That decision was stayed while the Supreme Court took on this case. So the practical effect may not be felt, but it's interesting because they won in the lower courts, and now the Supreme Court has said, no way, you had no business being in court in the first place.
Right. So as a legal matter, those lower court decisions, as you know, are now wiped off the books. They have no legal effect whatsoever. But of course, that's been the story with the last 2 challenges to Obamacare. It was the government each time defending it and against the challengers. Now, in the last couple of cases, the Supreme Court did say that the challengers could bring their cases. So this is the first time the Supreme Court on an Obamacare decision has refused to get into the merits. And as I say, it does leave the door open. I mean, frankly, this was the second best hope of defenders of Obamacare. Their first hope was that the court would either say, look, even if the individual mandate is unconstitutional, you can saw that out and leave the rest of the law intact with the coverage for young people and pre-existing conditions and so forth. So their second best hope was a decision like this, because it still leaves the door open. It doesn't answer the fundamental question, is it constitutional or not?
No, and we can imagine that lawyers who are litigating against Obamacare are searching right now and will be reading this decision to determine who are the proper plaintiffs to bring these challenges to court. So we may see another Supreme Court with another decision. Pete Williams, I'm going to let you leave it there, and you can go read the opinion more closely. We'll, of course, have the latest on NBC News Now, on MSNBC, and tonight on NBC Nightly News. We'll return most of you to Today. I'm Savannah Guthrie. This has been an NBC News special report.
As Americans return to work, a growing number of hospitals, colleges, and employers, they're requiring employees to be vaccinated, but some workers are pushing back. Senior national correspondent Kate Snow sat down with a group of nurses. They're at the center of a court battle for refusing to take the vaccine. Kate joins us now. Kate, good morning.
Good morning, Joe. So this is an issue that started weeks ago when they filed suit in Texas. And last weekend, a judge basically said they do not have a case, that they are not allowed to say we don't want this COVID vaccine. And if they do, they will lose their jobs. I sat down with 4 of those who first filed suit.
A hospital once inundated with COVID patients, now the stage for a different battle.
And my company could ask me to jump off a building if I wanted to. It doesn't mean I have to do it.
I don't believe I should have to make the choice to put this in my body to continue to do a job that I've been doing successfully for 14 years.
Asking us to do things that could be contrary to our own health and could be detrimental to our health for the sake of making other people feel comfortable, I don't believe is right.
I survived it, actually getting the virus. It makes no sense to me to go and get a shot for something that I've already survived.
Jennifer, Kara, Sarah, and Kathy have all chosen not to get vaccinated and are all losing their jobs at Houston Methodist. They're concerned the vaccine didn't go through extensive clinical trials before being given to the public.
If I were to take this vaccine, then therefore I am a part of a clinical trial that I do not want to be a part of.
But there were trials. This is not the trial, as you just said. There were trials.
I don't trust the safety of this. I do not believe that it has been tested adequately by any means.
None of them agree with the guidance from all major health authorities in the U.S. that the vaccines are effective and safe.
Every public health organization, the CDC, the FDA, say that it is safe and effective. Mm-hmm. You don't believe those organizations?
No, I don't. I do not believe them at all.
Federal agencies and the vast majority of medical experts say adverse reactions to the vaccines are exceedingly rare and that staying unvaccinated is much more dangerous.
The science is also very clear about unvaccinated people. You remain at risk of mild or severe illness, of death, or of spreading the disease to others.
Yet these nurses all argue they've seen adverse effects.
People that I have worked with, people that I know, family members, close friends that have had serious side effects.
Jennifer claims she's treated hundreds of patients at Houston Methodist who had adverse reactions to the vaccine, a statement the CEO of the hospital completely disputes.
It's a shame when we see misinformation put out there. That's completely inaccurate. Of course, we all see side effects of the vaccines. We know that sore arms and small low-grade fever and a number of other things happen. But for her to imply that there has been something more than that is frankly downright offensive to the people who work at Houston Methodist.
Dr. Mark Boom says 99% of employees are now vaccinated after first offering bonuses and then making it a condition of employment. Kathy says she resigned shortly after Dr. Boom sent an email reacting to the lawsuit, reading in part, "It is unfortunate that the few remaining employees who refuse to get vaccinated and put our patients first are responding in this way."
I felt like that was just another knife to the back. We had been there every day to go to work in an environment that wasn't safe. First, we were heroes, and now I feel like I'm the villain.
Well, I'm disappointed that she felt she felt that way. What I've heard repeatedly, time and time again, from the vast majority of employees is a big resounding thank you. A thank you for leading the way. A thank you for putting patient safety first.
3 of the nurses are now trying to find jobs. Kathy has been a nurse for 20 years. She actually resigned. She told me she never wants to work in nursing again. So this group of 117 plaintiffs, guys, represents a tiny fraction of the overall workforce at Houston Methodist. They have 26,000 employees. But this group argues that there were more colleagues who did not want to get the vaccine, but did so just to keep getting a paycheck. Joe, Savannah.
So, Kate, you say the group has appealed the court's decision. What's next for them?
Right. They did appeal. They want to take it up to potentially the Texas Supreme Court. And they say if it has to go all the way to the U.S. Supreme Court, so be it. They will fight all the way. Joe.
All right. Kate, thanks for your report. Appreciate it.
Tensions at home are rising for kids who want to get vaccinated, but their parents refuse to let them. I spoke to several teens about how they were able to navigate the difficult conversation. A hint, the internet.
Like, I know, like, everybody in our family has mixed reviews on, like, the COVID vaccine or even COVID in general.
Megan Kosar is 17 years old. She wanted the COVID vaccine. But when she asked her parents for an appointment, they told her they didn't trust it.
I may have yelled at them a little bit. I'm not going to lie. I was, like, very upset. But then I decided, like, okay, I'll try again tomorrow and the day after that and keep going until I break them down. Because it was either I break them down or they break me down.
According to a survey by the Kaiser Family Foundation, an estimated 1 in 4 parents say they won't allow their kids to get vaccinated. In all but 5 states, 12 to 15-year-olds need their parents to sign off. For teens 16 to 18, it's all over the place.
Just like random times I would bring it up, just so they would get it in their head.
Megan logged online for help. So after they said no and you got upset, then what did you do to get information to talk to them about it?
Well, I went upstairs into my room and I looked up how to convince your parents to get the vaccine.
That's exactly what you Googled?
Yeah.
How to convince your parents. On the other side of those searches, another teen, 18-year-old Kelly Danielpour.
There is a lot of misinformation about how these work.
She runs VaxTeen, a website that connects teenagers like Megan with the science-based information they're looking for. It was around before COVID, but Kelly says searches have skyrocketed during the pandemic.
There has definitely been an explosion. I mean, I see new posts every single day from every state.
Some even asking for help on sites like Reddit. Can you read me some of the messages that you're getting from other teenagers?
I really want to get the COVID vaccine to keep myself and others safe. I've done extensive research on it, and I've debunked every argument or concern that my parents may have about it. but they won't budge.
And what would you say to that?
I'll give actually teens my phone number and I say, hi, do you want to call me? Or we can brainstorm together. It's really very heartbreaking to hear.
And how many messages like this do you think you've seen at this point?
Easily thousands.
High school senior Kenny Anderson also experienced tension at home. Tell me what your family said when you first wanted to get the shot.
My family just was not in favor of it, and they were like, I just don't think you should do it.
But then he realized since he's 18, he could get the shot without his family's permission.
I didn't dismiss their opinion. I just one day signed myself up when it was at the schools. I turned in the form, and I just went and didn't really talk about it to anybody besides a couple friends. And then after I was done, I'm like, hey guys, I got the vaccine.
What would you have done if you were 17? I mean, how would you feel?
I would have felt very scary because I'm going off to college.
As for Megan, her research paid off. Her mom eventually took her to her appointment, and she's now fully vaccinated with a message to others just like her.
Don't give up and just keep a cool, calm head. Just work with however they will respond best to.
One of the interesting things that we read a lot is many of these teens on Reddit say their parents were never anti-vax until this particular vaccine. And Kelly's advice is, remember, on both sides of this conversation, this is likely coming from a place of love. A parent wants to protect their child, and the teen wants to protect those around them. And also, of course, make sure you're getting your information on this important topic from trustworthy sources, not just your social media feed. Let's now look at what's making news around the world this morning.
NBC's Matthew Bodner joins us again from Moscow. Matt, good morning.
Joe, good morning. So let's start here in Russia, where basically things are really positive after yesterday's Putin-Biden summit. And the foreign ministry has announced basically the first impact of that, and that is that the Russian ambassador to Washington will return there by the end of this month. We are expecting the American ambassador will come back here in due time as well. Moving over to Hong Kong, where actually the editor-in-chief of the Apple Daily, an independent outlet there, and 4 other executives were arrested by police for allegedly violating a Beijing-imposed national security law for what they say was calling for foreign interference in Chinese and Hong Kong affairs by advocating for sanctions against Hong Kong and China. And sticking in that region, the Chinese people today are in mourning over the death of a so-called heroic pig who survived 36 days under the rubble after a 2008 earthquake. That pig lived to see the age of 14.
Wow. Right. Oh, my gosh. That's a heroic story.
That is quite the pig. All right. Thank you, Matt. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Matt.
Thank you. Coming up, a murder mystery in Mississippi.
Yeah, a former state legislator killed outside the home her sister-in-law was found dead in just months earlier. We will investigate up next. Victoria's Secret will no longer be identified by its world-famous angel wings. Instead, the brand will lean on high-profile women like soccer superstar and activist Megan Rapinoe, who are known for their accomplishments rather than their figures. The brand tapped all different kinds of famous women who share a common passion for positive change. They will work with Victoria's Secret to redefine how the company markets to young women, which is pretty cool.
Yeah, it seems like such a great idea, and kind of seemed like they were kind of moving in this direction anyway, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And there's got a whole list of really cool people that are partnering with them. I mean, it's going to be totally different than what we used to know them as. So interesting to see.
Very cool. Thank you. Now to a tragic story out of Mississippi, where a former state legislator was found fatally shot Sunday at the same home where her sister-in-law was found dead just 6 months earlier. The Mississippi Bureau of Investigation is looking into this case as a homicide. NBC News Now correspondent Maura Barrett has more.
Joe, Savannah, this morning, no arrests, no real leads even that we're aware of. The Yallapusha Sheriff's Office here not giving us any answers on the status of the investigation. The former state legislator here in Mississippi, Ashley Henley, was shot in the back of the head over the weekend, found dead at the same site where her sister-in-law was found dead in a burned-out trailer 6 months ago, the day after Christmas. The Sheriff's Office here is the lead investigator in addition to the Mississippi Bureau of Investigations. But friends and family are really concerned that they're not getting any answers for even this week's murder or what's being investigated as a murder or what happened to her sister-in-law. I spoke with Ashley's husband as well as a close friend to describe and hear from what type of person she was and what they think happened.
I mean, she was she spent her life serving. Like, she was an educator. She worked 2 jobs full time, put herself through college to get a master's degree. This all falls back on accountability. The person who did this should be held accountable for my sister. And if he was held accountable, I think my wife would still be alive today.
I just know that she was the kind of person that wanted to see justice no matter what. And I know she didn't back down from anybody. And I know that she felt like that the case wasn't necessarily getting the attention that it needed. And I believe that, she was kind of pursuing her own leads and asking questions about her sister-in-law's murder back in December.
Brandon, Ashley's husband, who you heard from there, has expressed doubt in how the sheriff's office is going to conduct this investigation. They have not responded to our request for comment, but he did say that he will not stop asking questions or bringing attention to the case until justice and accountability is found for whoever killed his sister and now his wife. Joe, Savannah.
All right, coming up, many parts of the country still don't have access to high-speed internet. So to fix it, the Biden administration is calling for broadband to be treated as a public utility.
But here's the catch. Some state laws won't allow it. We'll explain the rules that might be holding back some communities next. Time for our CNBC Money Minute, the biggest financial headlines of the day and why they matter to you. And CNBC's Bertha Coombs is back with us. Bertha, good morning.
Hey, Joe. A group of bipartisan lawmakers found something they could agree on. They've introduced a bill to make it easier for people to cancel online subscriptions after the free trial ends. The Unsubscribe Act requires companies to be more transparent about their subscriptions. It addresses what's known as negative option billing. When you sign up, you forget about it a year later, and all of a sudden, there you are after that free trial, and you get switched to full price subscriptions. When that is over, the bill would require companies to provide you with a clear understanding of the terms of the contract. Meantime, the CEO of Albertsons says the grocery chain is seeing higher levels of inflation. He tells CNBC's Jim Cramer that it's happening in an environment where the consumer is really strong and they've been able to handle it, at least so far. He's also seeing some pandemic-era buying habits that are continuing. Shoppers are still trading up on meat, shellfish, and to premium wines. Maybe not so much on toilet paper anymore, though. Instagram users can now host group fundraisers. After you create an event, you can add friends and family members by tapping the share icon and the invite group members option. You can then ask all your combined followers to donate and pool your proceeds. Instagram will not take any cut of what you raise. It's similar to what you've already seen on Facebook, and it's really a nice way to sort of share a cause that's important to you.
That's great. Good to see that, whatever it takes to help groups out. Bertha, thanks so much. In an effort to bridge the country's digital divide, the Biden administration is calling for broadband to be treated as essential infrastructure. However, some state laws prevent cities from doing that. NBC News technology correspondent Jake Ward has that story.
Good morning, Joe, Savannah. That's right. High-speed internet connections have become fundamental after the pandemic, right? We all learned that you have to have it to participate in the modern economy. It's as fundamental as electricity. Well, it turns out that when one city decided to begin selling broadband internet the same way they sell electricity, things got complicated. High school teacher Michelle Galloway spent months struggling to connect with students from her North Carolina farmhouse during the pandemic.
Sometimes I would cry after a class.
At times, the slow internet made it nearly impossible to communicate.
I had one student to hold up a sign saying, "Miss Galloway, ask that question again." So I wrote it out and held it up.
High-speed broadband internet needed for video conferencing has always been hard to get in rural America because companies make less money connecting remote communities than they do cities. But Wilson, North Carolina is an exception. You wouldn't think that a place like this has world-class broadband speeds, but the truth is, it does. But in order to actually connect all of these houses, crews have to install fiber optic cable like these. After a large cable company refused to partner with Wilson, the city spent $32 million to create its own broadband network, making high-speed internet a public utility here, available to anyone in the county, like gas or electricity.
We didn't just cherry pick the most profitable or potentially profitable regions.
Only 2 cities in North Carolina are allowed to provide internet this way, because state law, backed by the telecom industry, now essentially forbids internet as a public utility on the grounds of fair competition. 18 other states have similar laws. But just 30 miles north of Wilson, Rocky Mount's mayor says the law is holding his town back.
We've got to have the technology to enable our resident population to live here.
Residents here say the internet offered by private companies is so slow, many go to the library for a reliable connection.
When I have to do online applications, when I have to apply for jobs or look for rental assistance.
Michelle Galloway is now connected to Wilson's high-speed network and says the issue of access could be a learning opportunity for her students.
It would be a wonderful group project. Why do 18 states take this perspective on the expansion of broadband internet?
Now, Joe, Savannah, the North Carolina General Assembly has begun to consider possibly overturning these rules, but these kinds of rules are spreading across the country. In fact, Ohio just recently slipped something into a bill that passes something very similar to the rules that North Carolina is under. If you want to see if your state is affected in this way, you might want to look at our longer digital report on NBCnews.com.
A planned remake of the popular cartoon Scooby-Doo is causing controversy over the casting of one of its main characters. Warner Brothers announced last week that the role of Velma Dinkley will be played by Indian-American actress Mindy Kaling in the new HBO Max reboot. That announcement quickly drew backlash on Twitter. I want to bring in Sakshi Venkat-Raman. She wrote about the controversy for NBC Asian America. Sakshi, good to have you with us. So let's delve into some of these issues that have come up here. For one, some critics claim that casting Mindy Kaling as Velma plays into the so-called model minority myth. Can you explain what that means and why some people are outraged?
Sure. So I think a large part of the outrage that we're seeing on Twitter and social media right now is pretty much blatantly racist, right? But saying casting an East Asian woman, and just to be clear, Mindy Kaling is voicing Velma, but the character of Velma is planned to be an East Asian woman. So a lot of people just being racist and saying that they pretty much don't want to see an East Asian person as their beloved traditionally white character, right? But another segment of the people that are commenting on this issue are Asian Americans expressing concerns about how the character will be portrayed. And I think one of the concerns is that casting a stereotypically nerdy character as an Asian would play into something called the model minority myth, which is basically a fallacy that has long been perpetuated by white people in power that portrays Asian Americans as inherently successful or hardworking or studious or nerdy in this case in order to oppress other minority groups. And I think a lot of people are concerned when, you know, there's a character that has long been sort of the nerd of the group that is now being rebranded as an East Asian.
So this isn't the first time that a person of color has been cast in a role that maybe initially was considered a white role. In fact, the same character of Velma has actually been voiced by other people of color over the years. Tell us more about what you learned about the history here and how this has all played out in the past.
Sure. Yeah, I think that that's one of the things that has been missing from this conversation, right, is that it's been done before. This isn't the first time that the character of Velma has been played by an East Asian. In remakes in 2009 and 2010, live action remakes, she was played by Hayley Kiyoko, who's a Japanese American actress and singer. She's also been voiced by Gina Rodriguez and, you know, made to look like more of a brown character, I think only a couple of years back. And so this isn't a new phenomenon, but another thing that's not new is the racist reaction that's happening in response to this. I think every time that a beloved white character or a character that has been traditionally white is recast as a person of color, there's always been backlash. You know, I think in the 90s, I think it was 97, when Brandy was cast to play Cinderella, there was outrage at that as well. You don't even have to look that far. Last year, when Halle Bailey was cast as the new Ariel, people actually trended the hashtag #NotMyAriel in protest of of that because they were so offended at the possibility that a woman of color could occupy that traditionally white role.
Keeping in mind these are imaginary characters to begin
Right.
with. Now, in your article, quickly, I know you spoke with a sociologist who says characters like Velma have the potential to fall into some sort of trap, but that they don't have to. What did she mean by that?
Right. So I think she meant that whenever you just take a character who has a white character arc and backstory and sort of put a POC face on them, there's the potential to sort of erase their identity and not develop an individual story for them and rather just like rebrand them. So I think what the sociologist that I spoke to was saying is that if we want to make this show successful, the people who are creating it need to develop Velma as a character and give her a storyline outside of what's already been done in previous versions of Scooby-Doo.
All right. Fascinating article. Sakshi, thanks so much for joining us this morning to talk about it. We appreciate it. Transgender rights are in the crosshairs in dozens of state houses across the country. In Arkansas, the governor originally vetoed a bill banning transition-related health care for trans minors earlier this year, but the state Senate overrode him.
House Bill 1570 would put the state as the definitive oracle of medical care, overriding parents, patients, and healthcare experts. While in some instances the state must act to protect life, the state should not presume to jump into the middle of every medical, human, and ethical issue.
Now 4 trans teens and their families are suing the state of Arkansas for passing this law. I recently spoke with one of those teenagers, David Brandt. Here's a preview of our conversation as part of our Pride Month special report, Trans America. I know you've been on testosterone for a little less than a year now. If this new law in Arkansas goes into effect, how's that going to impact you?
In so many different ways. It's really hard to tell exactly how it could impact me, but it could impact me in so many different ways. Since starting on my gender affirming care, my confidence and happiness and overall mental health well-being has just shot up, and I'm doing so much better, so that it could impact that a lot.
Mom, how worried are you about this?
I'm worried. I'm trying really hard to be cautiously optimistic, but I'm worried that all of the progress that he has made could come to a halt, and that the happy, well-adjusted kid that I know now could be impacted in a negative way if this were to take effect.
You saw there, we spoke with all 4 families in Arkansas involved in that lawsuit. You can watch our NBC News Now special, Trans America, tonight at 8 p.m. Eastern, right here on all your streaming platforms. Coming up, just 36 days from now, the Olympic torch will finally be lit in Tokyo after a year of controversial delays. So who better than Jackie Joyner-Kersee, one of the greatest athletes to ever represent Team USA, to join us live on our athlete's journey to post-pandemic glory. That's Jackie Joyner-Kersee is a 4-time Olympian and the world record holder in the heptathlon. The track and field star was named the 20th century's greatest female athlete by Sports Illustrated. And since retiring, she's remained a force for justice in her native East St. Louis with the Jackie Joyner-Kersee Foundation. And we are very lucky to have her with us here today. Jackie, good morning. Thanks for being with us.
Good morning, and thanks for having me.
So first of all, I have to ask you about what's coming up now, a little over a month from now. After a year-long delay, the Tokyo Olympics are right around the corner. Track and field trials actually begin tomorrow. Help us understand what's going through athletes' minds right now going into such a big event, especially after everything they've gone through for the past year.
You know, the athletes have trained for this very moment, even, being delayed, that they are still... the anxiety is building, but they're ready to perform. And in track and field, our Olympic trials are the hardest, and just being ready on those given days, knowing that the moment is here and this is their moment to execute everything they have prepared, have put together, and the Olympic trials are here.
Have you thought at all about how you would have handled it if you had had that delay of a year because of a pandemic? How much of a challenge that would have been?
it's easy to sit in my seat now because I'm not competing. But even if I was, it was always about focus on the things I can control and not worry about the things I cannot. And all we had to do was regroup, my coach, who was my husband, and my other teammates have conversation, with one another. But more importantly, realize that the games are going to come. And when the games come, make sure that I'm ready and we're ready for those Olympic trials to put ourselves on the Olympic team.
Some great advice there. Now, Jackie, Adidas celebrated your legacy as an athlete and role model in their Honoring Black Excellence series. What does it mean to you to be considered such a huge trailblazer?
You know what? It is just an honor to be a part of the Adidas family. And more importantly, they see me beyond the things on the athletic field, what I have been doing in my community for over 30 years, and to inspire a generation that they could be anything they want to be. And so being able to have, the Black excellence right behind me and to celebrate with Adidas is so important, for the work that I do in the community of East St. Louis and telling young people the impossible is probable and Black excellence is you.
I want to ask you a little more about that work you're doing in East St. Louis. I mean, tell us more about the work your foundation does there and just how important it is to you.
Yes, so I started my work back in the late 80s, and now we have been going 21 years strong, open. We do door-to-door transportation. We would pick up from school, bring them to the JJK Center. They come in the doors. They do the enrichment. We give them meals. We take them home. They go through the Jackie Joyner-Kersee Winning in Life curriculum. That's around emotional and social responsibility, being able to take these principles and then transformation and taking that into the community. So for us, it's just our work. We say our dream is always in motion, but more importantly, it's a team effort. I don't do this alone. I have a great staff. And people believe in me. I have a great working board that believe in the dream and the mission and keep pushing it forward. And it's great to have Adidas as a partner. And when we celebrate, Black excellence is in everyone that comes through the doors or walk the streets of East St. Louis to let them know that it's possible.
Well, you are certainly proof of that. We appreciate everything you're doing. And thank you for taking a few moments to speak with us this morning, Jackie.
Thank you.
All right. And that does it for this hour of Morning News Now. The news continues right now. The U.S. is facing a major housing crisis. A new report reveals new home construction has slowed significantly, and there's a housing inventory shortage by millions of units. NBC News senior business correspondent Stephanie Ruhle explains what that means for home buyers.
Here, let me just show you that. On paper, Danielle and Kristen Sills are the perfect first-time home buyers.
Our credit is impeccable. Our savings are in check. We have zero debt, but in this market, we cannot compete.
They've upped their budget and widened their search of the Boston area, but the last house they bid on had 29 offers.
It sold for about 70 or 80,000 over what the asking price was, and it was a 1,200 square foot home.
One of the biggest issues, the lack of homes for sale, 20% fewer compared to a year ago.
We've built fewer homes this last decade than any decade going back to the 1960s. So going into the pandemic, we were already facing a housing shortage, and it's just gotten so much worse.
A new report finds the pace of construction slowed, creating a shortage of more than 5.5 million units.
You can't just flip a switch and create more housing.
The advice for buyers, do your research on what homes really sell for, not just the list price, and know your budget and your limit.
When might we see the housing market cool down? I think the housing market has already started to cool a bit, but it's not going to be a situation where buyers are going to get a better deal if they wait.
Competition fierce, with buyers making big life changes as we move toward a post-pandemic world. Stephanie Ruhle, NBC News.
Time for our CNBC Money Minute. The rest of the big financial headlines of the day and why they matter to you.
CNBC's Bertha Coombs is with us. Hi, Bertha. Good morning.
Hi, Joe and Savannah. TikTok's owner had a very good year financially in 2020. China's ByteDance saw revenue more than double, while profit hit $19 billion. Sources tell CNBC that ByteDance had nearly 2 billion monthly active users by the end of last year across all its platforms, including TikTok. ByteDance was named a national security threat, though, by the Trump administration last year and ordered to sell TikTok's U.S. operations. Reports say that deal has been shelved now indefinitely. Meantime, McDonald's CEO expects dining inside fast food restaurants to bounce back. Speaking at the CNBC Evolve conference, he says dine-in is always going to be here because eating is a social experience, especially for, kids' birthday parties. Digital orders and drive-through sales have surged over the past year, helping McDonald's and other fast food chains recover from the pandemic faster than the broader restaurant industry. McDonald's CEO says dine-in customers make up about a quarter of U.S. sales. And some positive news for the airline industry. Dutch carrier KLM says it plans to resume nearly all of its international routes this year as vaccines continue to roll out worldwide. KLM's CEO telling CNBC the U.S. market has shown strong signs of recovery and Europe should follow suit as vaccination rates rise. That would improve prospects for transatlantic travel. I want to plan a trip right now, but I'm sort of scared to see what the rates are like because everybody's so anxious to go. Prices are just going through the roof.
Well, Bertha, we've decided we're going to go to Paris Disneyland, right? I think we just decided that. Or
yes,
whatever.
You're welcome to join us.
So come with.
All right, sure.
All right. We'll do the show from there.
I do say Mickey en français.
There you go.
Oh, my gosh.
Sounds good. Can't wait. Thank you, Bertha.
This would be a fun group for a Euro trip. Thanks, Bertha.
And with Bill, of course.
Yeah, duh. All right, the 8-hour-plus workday has been the norm in Western culture for more than a century.
But as the pandemic shuffled our habits and traditions, some researchers are asking whether workers would be more productive and companies more profitable with shorter shifts. A new article in Wired UK asks whether a 5-hour workday could be ideal. Wired UK contributor Margaret Taylor joins us now. She wrote that piece. So, Margaret, we've all heard about companies trying the 4-day work week, a shorter week. What's the argument for a shorter work day?
Yeah, so there's quite a lot of research around shorter working days. There's been a lot done in Sweden on that a few years back. There were various different experiments looking at 6-hour working days there. And the findings of that were that people were happier, they were spending more time with their families, and as employee well-being went up, their productivity went up as well. That's been backed up by research from Oxford University, but there's been other research done. Now, this is published in a book by the consultant Alex Pang. He's reviewed a lot of the research, which says that cognitively, actually, for concentration-wise, people work better. In fact, well, they don't work better, but a 5-hour burst of activity is when you'll get the best out of employees.
And now we know the pandemic has accelerated some workplace trends, obviously, of course, remote work. But how do you think it's changed how companies think about scheduling and productivity when you talk about these 5-hour days? Obviously, people have had a lot going on at home with their kids there and all that type of stuff. What kind of stuff do you think will change,
Yeah, well, there have been companies that have been doing this, and as a result of the pandemic, they've kind of had to abandon the 5-hour working day. There was a company in Germany that was doing it, and it was having good results. People were very productive, but then when everyone went to working from home, it just wasn't going to work because the whole point of the 5-hour working day is that you're sitting down and you're focusing. It's 8 a.m. to 1 p.m. No breaks, no cell phones. You're just sitting there and you're really focusing on the work. So the pandemic has really changed that because with people working from home, obviously they can't do that. There are so many distractions. So there's had to be a bit of a rethink. But in terms of getting people back to the office, it could be something that employers start thinking about. Yeah. Because there's a lot of chat about hybrid working. People wanting to spend some time at home, spend some time in the office. And actually, there's a company in Liverpool in England has found that the best way of making it work is to have perhaps a couple of short days and a couple of normal days. So people, if they're working at home, they could have their longer days at home and the short days in the office.
Interesting stuff.
Yeah.
All right. We'll see. Margaret, thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
Coming up, the U.S. has for months led the world in COVID vaccination rates, but now that may no longer be the case.
We'll tell you what's behind the shot surge abroad next. The race to inoculate the world is speeding up as more countries gain access to the vaccine.
NBC News Now correspondent Dasha Burns explains how other countries are getting people vaccinated while the U.S. falls behind.
The United States got off to a quick start in the global vaccine race, but now it looks like other countries are starting to catch up and even pass us. For example, Canada's first dose vaccination rate surged ahead of the United States in late May. And now, for the first time since April, Canada has a lower rate of new daily cases than the U.S. And Canada is not the only country passing America in first dose vaccination rates. Nations like Hungary, Iceland, Mongolia, and Uruguay have all overtaken the United States in terms of the percentage of people with at least one shot. It's important to note that the percentage of fully vaccinated Americans is still about 5 times higher than the global average. Every country has taken a unique approach to vaccinations, but some have surged ahead. Take Malta, for example. The small Mediterranean nation benefited from the European Union vaccine pool while opting for additional shots from the European Commission. And officials have also relied on community health centers to cut down the lag between when doses arrive and when shots go into arms. It has also officially announced herd immunity and is leading the EU alongside Hungary in terms of first dose vaccination rates. Reaching people quickly, even in difficult circumstances, seems to be a common theme among countries that are ramping up their first dose rates. In Bhutan, healthcare workers have walked to remote villages through treacherous weather and flown in on helicopters to give people their shots. And it's worked. Bhutan is now one of the most vaccinated nations in the world. But there's no perfect solution. Countries like Canada may be reaching more people for their first shot, but residents often have to wait months before receiving their second dose. While researchers clinically studied 2 doses, and that's what was approved in the U.S. for the Pfizer and Moderna vaccines, 1 dose is partially effective and is proved to help bring down coronavirus rates overall. Still, we're seeing countries around the world ramp up first-dose vaccinations, and they're starting to leave the U.S. behind. Finland has been trailing America all year, but the nation is quickly closing the gap and is now less than 1% behind. But as the rest of the world continues to get new people vaccinated, the U.S. is grappling with vaccine hesitancy in the fight to keep communities safe.
So if you haven't gotten vaccinated or still have questions, talk to someone you trust, your physician, your pharmacist, your next door neighbor who got the shot. Talk to your faith leaders.
The latest numbers show new vaccinations across the country are decelerating, and we're less than 4 weeks out from the Biden administration's July 4th deadline for getting 70% of American adults at least one COVID-19 vaccine. About 12 million people need to get their first shot in the next few weeks in order to meet the president's goal. And first dose rates could continue to grow in other countries. Vaccine manufacturers have had to fill enormous U.S. government orders before shipping doses to other nations. But production has shot up, leaving more vaccines for the rest of the world. The United States got a jump start on vaccinations, but now other nations around the world are ramping up shots, which is a good thing for everyone. And that trend will likely continue after President Biden announced a plan to donate 500 million doses to countries in need. We're now 16 months into this pandemic, and the COVID vaccine has offered hope that we'll be able to get this virus under control and get back to normal.
Hey, NBC News viewers, thanks for checking out our YouTube channel. Subscribe by clicking on that button down here and click on any of the videos over here to watch the latest interviews, show highlights, and digital exclusives. Thanks for watching.